So Anastasia has already joined. So we'll just start in just 30 seconds. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Saturday morning sessions. So today we have Sri Anushri Gagji from Delhi NCR, who is going to take us through the part two. That's why we have seen Pushpa 2. So now we'll see section 31, part 2. So I would request Anushri ji to go ahead with the discussion on case study 3, because this is something that we had left last week. So we'll take it up from here. Anushri ji, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. So we discussed some case studies in the previous session last Saturday. Now let's continue with the next. So this we had started, but it was only for 2-3 minutes. And since it is an important one on Rule 47A, which has been introduced recently in November 24, so the plan is to have a detailed discussion on it. So the case goes like this. Harshit Limited received legal advocacy services for the financial year 23-24 from Advocate Jatin for an amount of rupees 10 lakh, on which the company has issued self-invoice and paid GST on. So we can take two scenarios here. One pre-47A, that is the company has paid it on 1st October 2024 under RCM. And the next scenario we can discuss as when it pays later, post 47A on 2nd December under RCM. Now, obviously, we'll be discussing the issues related to ITC here, the situation pre and post 47A. When we go to 47A, we have some issues like what should be the date of receipt for 47A, and what if self-invoice is not issued as per 47A, as per the timeline of 47A. We have all talked about these scenarios already in discussions also, and one such idea that comes up is even if you issue the invoice later, as per timeline of 47A, if you don't issue it on time but you issue it later, then also you can claim the credit by paying the interest and the necessary penalty of not issuing the invoice under 122(3)(e). So would that interest and penalty cure the defect of 47A? So all these issues we have with us for discussion. We can start with scenario A here, when the invoice is issued on 1st October 2024. So for that, I think we have the circular with us also, and it is quite clear that for 31(3)(f), whenever the invoice is issued, whichever year, you can consider that year for claiming ITC. By reading section 16(4) also along with it, and whenever self-invoice is issued under 31(3)(f), you can pre-47A, we can claim the ITC in according to that year. 16(4) timeline will be according to that year. So any different views on that we can discuss for scenario A. Also keeping in mind the transition of Rule 47A.
Anushri, just for the sake of the benefit of the group, can you share the
Yes.
circular also once? Can you share the circular also once if you have it ready with you?
Yes, I'll.
Yeah. We're just waiting for a few seconds. Anushri is just fetching out the circulars.
Yes.
Yeah.
2.7.
I think you would have to stop sharing this PPT and then start sharing the circular.
Okay, circular is not visible.
No, no.
So here's the circular, and 2.7 is the relevant para. Or should I open it from the beginning?
Yeah, I think if you can open it just from the beginning, so we'll have a context.
Yeah.
And maybe if you can briefly just share about the content, like, yeah.
Yeah. So earlier there were a lot of doubts as to what should be the timeline as per section 16.4 in case of self invoices, because there is no particular timeline specified in the law for issuing a self invoice. So the liability for payment of tax in case of reverse charge and the liability to issue invoice both lied in the hands of recipient. Whenever the recipient used to issue the invoice, he used to take the credit. But whether that was correct, considering the timeline of section 16.4 or not, that was the issue. So this is a clarificatory circular on that point. Now, there were representations from the industry that even when the self-invoice under 31(3)(f) is being issued after the timeline of section 16.4, like the goods and services have been received in a particular year, say 2020-21. However, the self-invoice is issued even later than 30th November 2021. Can ITC be claimed on that self-invoice, or will it be time barred as per section 16.4? So to clarify this, we have section 16.4, which says a registered person shall not be entitled to take ITC in respect of any invoice or debit note for supply of goods or services or both after 30th day of November following the end of financial year to which such invoice or debit note pertains. So pertains is the important word. Now, what does the circular say? That a combined reading of the above provisions leads to a conclusion that as ITC can be availed by recipient only on the basis of invoice or debit note or other duty-paying document, and as in case of RCM supplies, it is the self-invoice, and invoice is to be issued by the recipient himself. The relevant financial year for purpose of 16.4 will be the year to which invoice pertains, and the invoice pertains to the year when it is being issued. However, since the time of supply is triggered earlier in some cases, then the interest shall be paid for delayed payment of tax. But whenever the invoice is being issued, the timeline of section 16.4 will be calculated from that date. Also, the time of supply, it gets triggered, and if there is a case of delay of issuance of invoice, then the penalty provisions of section 122 will be applicable, but the credit is not being restricted. So should we move to the case study now?
Yes,
Anushka,
I think now, yeah.
I had
Arup,
one.
sir, one point.
Yeah.
Here, prior to the circular, there was an argument from the department stating that 16.4 has only the tax invoice, that's invoice or debit note, so that doesn't cover self-invoice. But if we read the Rule 36, which says that what are the documentary requirements for claiming input tax credit, that Rule 36 sub-rule B says an invoice issued in accordance with the provision of clause F of subsection 3 of 31 subject to the payment of the tax. So I
Right.
think some indication was already there in that Rule 36 sub-rule B which says that the documentary to avail the credit was an invoice subject to the payment of tax. So the month in which you are paying the taxes and the invoice which is issued, that will suffice in Rule 36B. So I think they are, by way of the circular, they are trying to give a clarity that the month in which you are making the payment of taxes, you can issue the self invoice without referring to 16(4). So my question here is, can the rule override the section? That is what, whether it can go beyond 16(4) time limit by paying interest, or is it something beyond that 16(4)? I just want to understand.
Yes, and the same issue crops up in after 47A also, that whether interest will cure the defect of 47A.
Yeah, now
And
at
the
least,
rule overrides the section.
yeah. So now at least they brought something giving a time limitation, all that. And the circular was only like, it was curing the defect which was there in the drafting of the law. So by this, they are saying you can raise the invoice now and you can pay the tax and take the credit, even though it is pertaining to the previous years, which is crossing the time limit of 16(4). But if you read that rules 36 sub rule B, it says subject to the payment of tax. So the month in which you make a payment of tax, I think that is sufficing to issue that invoice and take the credit actually. So I think this was the argument which was there prior to the circular also. And
For that they are saying you pay the interest and you pay the penalty.
yeah, now
But
they
you
brought saying that see, we are required to make a payment of interest because we are not complying with the time of supply provision under section 13 or section 12, as the case may be, for the reverse charge. That is a one aspect. But here the issue is, see, this circular, see, we are having a practical issues of royalties now. That is pertaining to the earlier years, and now the decision has come that there is a levy of taxes on royalty. So now the issue is the taxpayers are thinking whether to pay the taxes now and take the credit. Can we apply this circular prior to November 1st and take the benefit of that credit? So that is one more aspect which we are trying to test here. So only thing is, can the circular override section 16(4), or can it come out with the saying that you can take the credit by making a payment of tax now? So this is one more issue I thought I'd just take it. So why it has gone beyond 16(4) is the question here. The moot question is that.
And, what is your view, ma'am, on the same?
Because what I am just trying to analyze is 16 subsection 4 is using the term only invoice. It has not used the term as tax invoice. So that is also one more way of looking that. If you read 16.4, see, it says a registered person will not be entitled to take ITC in respect of any invoice.
Any invoice, tax invoice word is not used here.
Yeah, they have not used the term as tax invoice. So even self invoice is an invoice, right? And they have used the word any invoice.
And should we differentiate between tax invoice and invoice? Because in section 2, if we look at the definitions, it says it means an invoice or a tax invoice both.
Yeah.
No, madam. We totally agree that is this thing. But what I'm saying, it will be important to see pertain to year. See, circular is clarifying because the section 16 subsequent pertain to which financial year. Whether we should see based on the content or based on the data for self invoice. So that was the anomaly in 16.4 that is getting clarified through circular.
No, then if you read that circular, Mala, it is saying the month in which you are making a payment of tax, in that month itself, you can take the credit. And already that rule 36 sub rule B has already clarified. So why this again further circular has come on this aspect?
To clarify the linking of dates, that whenever the self invoice is being issued, because it's actually basically clarifying the word pertaining. So whenever the invoice is being issued, from that you count the limit and not from the date when you were liable to issue the invoice or when you have actually issued the invoice. It is clarifying the significance of word pertain.
Ma'am, so does that mean that if we make a delay in the payment of reverse charge, we will be eligible to claim the ITC of that specific amount? If that be the case.
Yes, since it is since we are looking for an assessee favoring argument, reverse charge. That is why the circular has come, right? It is clarifying the position of ITC that even when 16.4 timeline has gone away,
Hmm.
credit will be available because you should count the date for claiming ITC. The timeline of 16.4 should be counted from the date when you're actually issuing the self invoice, not from the date when time of supply triggered, or not from the date when payment was made.
Right.
So 13.3C was also inserted with the same intent.
Yes, it was.
So at this
So
point, I
in
had one
3C,
more
we
point
have here
to
the
make.
date of issue of invoice by the recipient in cases where invoice is to be issued by the recipient. It was introduced simultaneously along with Rule 47A with effect from 1st November.
So basically, what they've done is they have shortened the time of supply period. Earlier, it was open-ended. What I'm able to understand is.
Yes, for self-invoice, they have now prescribed a timeline. Earlier, the recipients were issuing self-invoice on their own wish as to whenever they've used to feel that, okay, the service is complete, or okay, we should issue an invoice now and take the credit.
See, majorly this is applicable only when your supplier is unregistered, right? It is not like all the reverse charge are getting covered into this, because 31(3)(f) is only applicable where your vendor is unregistered.
Yes, ma'am.
Exactly,
So
when there is
Yeah.
import of services or government entities involved. Only these two
Yeah.
cases I can think of.
Import, I think there is a specific circular for that. So I think here they are trying to cover only the unregistered suppliers here.
exactly, because for that only
Yeah.
TOS was not clear. Actually, the TOS
Correct,
is now
correct.
clear, and accordingly the circular has been issued to clarify the entire scenario.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah,
import
but
of services without consideration was also covered in the circular, right?
Without consideration.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Anushri ma'am, can you share the circular once?
yes.
I think in
So,
the
ma'am,
first para,
Yes, sir.
itself, it says activity performed by overseas related person and no consideration may not be considered as supply of service. Accordingly, no invoice as well as no tax paid by the said recipient under RCM in respect of the same. Oh, so you don't have to pay at all when there is no consideration.
When there is no consideration, and even in 9.3 cases, practically there was no self-invoice being issued. Whenever the payment was done, the credit was claimed because the supplier is anyways issuing the invoice, and that is also coming in 2B.
But
Mainly
this is in
9.4
contradiction to
cases.
7.1C, right? 7.1C says import of service without consideration is also a supply.
So I like to add one point, like to share my view. So why this point was added? Because of this valuation rule, Rule 28, second proviso. Because if it is a related party and I am eligible, so probably I am not able to see the entire circular, but because they have told the uh, not requirement of this particular payment of taxes, because that is probably eligible for full ITC.
So you are saying it was because of 28.2.
It is because of 28
20.
subsection 1 ka second proviso.
Yeah, actually,
Not subsection sub rule.
I'll give the background. The background is when this 199 circular came, no, for the cross charge and all. So now demands were being raised by the department by DGGI saying that wherever import of service is there and you have not paid it, their rule 28, second provisional rule 28 cannot be applicable. Whereas we were taking this argument that though second provisional rule 28 is from the perspective of the supplier, why the recipient will not be applicable when the recipient is obligated to pay the tax on that particular supply. So this is something that was clarified here that even in only for the limited purpose of import of services. Okay, import of services from distinct persons. This particular second provisional rule 22 will apply. Though in the if you read the rule as such, it is applicable only from the perspective of the supplier. So that was clarified here, but it's only for the limited purpose of import of services. So that I think what Arun ji was saying, that is the particular thing, and that was the basis of making this clarification. Because after this, only DGGI dropped many of the allegations based on all this the royalty and the brand charges that we are using. All the software companies, they've been, they've been told that they will be issued with heavy, huge show cause notice based on that. So post that particular, post this clarification. So what is happening? Even second provisional rule 28 can be also taken by the recipient also when he's discharging the tax under RCM. So any other views or any other inputs? Vishalji or Gurjit, anybody else? Venuji is also joined. Or else I think we can move ahead. Honestly, we can I think move ahead. Then.
We can
Yeah,
move
yeah.
further.
For 47A, I would like to discuss one point. It says from the date of receipt of service, the invoice is to be issued within 30 days. So, like in this example only, what should be the exact date of receipt of service? Although time of supply is there to tell us, but say for financial year 23-24, the advocacy services are being received. Now, in absence of a contract or agreement, the services can be said to be complete on 31st March 24, or the date when all the matters related to 23-24 have, been completed. Or it has to be, if a contract is entered into, it has to be as per the contract. So should we now suggest the clients to clearly enter into a contract or agreement so as to avoid any litigation for 47A?
Anushri, can you please switch the screen to your presentation where this case study is there on the circular, please?
Can you put it on slide, that thing? Yeah, thank you so much. And Rashidi, since some of the members have joined a bit late, so can you please just illustrate the case study once again?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
So the case studies goes like Harshit Limited received legal advocacy services for financial year 23-24 from Advocate Jatin for an amount of rupees 10 lakh, on which the company, that is Harshit Limited, the recipient, has issued self-invoice and paid GST on. So we have discussed the first scenario, which is pre-47A on 1/10/2024. And B scenario is when the invoice is issued on 2nd December 2024. In this, right now, we are discussing the issue that what should be the date of receipt of services for 47A. So if I take you through 47A, it says, notwithstanding anything contained in Rule 47, where an invoice referred to in Rule 46 is required to be issued under 31(3)(f) by a registered person who is liable to pay tax under 9(3) or 9(4), he shall issue the said invoice within a period of 30 days from the date of receipt of the said supply of goods or services. So we are discussing the issue, when should the receipt of services be taken for the purpose of 47A? Should it be as per section 13, time of supply, or it is not linked with time of supply, because time of supply only tells you about the levy, as to when is the levy is triggered. The receipt might be completed at a separate date also. And should we, suggest the clients now to enter into a particular contract clarifying the date of receipt so as to avoid any litigation for the purpose of Rule 47A? Because in this very case study itself, should we consider 31st March 24 as the date of receipt of service for 47A? Or should it be a date when all the matters related to 23-24 are cleared from the side of Advocate Jatin? Because matters related to 23-24 might crop up at a later date also, say 2-3 years later also.
Madam, in case we have not brought in the element of payment of advance. So section 13 is only for remitting of the taxes. Irrespective, so 13 and 31(3)(f) definitely co-joint reading, but it is not to be said that I will have to wait for the self-tax invoice. Now, since the remittance of tax is happening and I have to compute the liability, so I am issuing self-tax invoice as an RCM. But if we swap it, if it is a forward charge, then the supplier would pay tax as advance, but he will not issue the invoice unless the service is complete.
Right. So we are not linking 13.3 with the date of receipt. They can be separate. We are agreeing on this.
So my view, RCM and the forward charge would, in the same case, if it was not an RCM, the answer would be different. If it is an RCM, answer would be different, is what I am saying.
Yes, yes. Any other views on this?
Anushri, how would you link 13.3C with 47A, Rule 47A? How would you link these two provisions?
So let us go through 13.3 once. The time of supply shall be earlier of following dates. It says date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier in cases where invoice is required to be issued by the supplier. So we can say B is for 9.3 cases. And C is the date of issue of invoice by the recipient in cases where invoice is to be issued by the recipient. Now, C is for 9.3 also and 9.4 also, because the recipient is anyways required to issue the invoice in both the cases, in 9.3 also and 9.4 also. But the only point is, in case of 9.3, the invoice will be reflected in 2B. The invoice issued by the supplier will be reflected in 2B. So the invoice, the recipient, in my view, since one thing is already on records now from 2B, the recipient cannot delay the issue of invoice from his side to a, like he has to issue the invoice timely in that case. Or he has to justify that the date of receipt of service is at a later date. Now, coming to the question that ma'am said, how can we link 13.3C with 47A? So 13.3 says that the date of issue of invoice, the time of supply will be triggered when the recipient issues the invoice. Now, recipient is required to issue the invoice within 30 days of receipt of service as per 47A. So, in my view, 47A will come earlier and then 13.3 will come into picture. 13.3C will come into picture. However, it will be a problem in case of 9.3 because in my view, since it is on record as per 2B, then the invoice cannot be delayed. So are we agreeing on this point that we'll look at 47A before, like we'll decide the date of
Anushri, I please, I do not understand the 2B issue which you are saying.
Sorry, sir, which
explain
issue?
that perspective? The 2B, that invoice would be reflecting in 2B.
Yeah, so that thing is, in case of section 9.3, the supplier is also issuing an invoice, and that invoice is being reflected in 2B. In
Yes, so
case of section
there
9.4,
47A or 31(3)(f) will not come into play in that, or will it? In case
the
supplier has issued an invoice.
47A is linked because as per 47A, anyways, the recipient has to issue a self-invoice even if it is 9.3 or 9.4. So
Ma'am, but
I'm
it is
saying
Not in
applicable
cases,
only where the
not in
supplier is
cases where,
unregistered, na?
Only
not in cases where.
unregistered 9.3, no? Not all 9.3, right?
Yes, yes.
yes.
So in unregistered, it will not be reflected in 2B, right?
31(3)(f).
Yeah, even F also, it's only unregistered. So registered would anyhow issue an invoice. He would be reporting as an RCM in table 4. So the recipient definitely doesn't need to issue a self-tax invoice.
Agreed.
He is making payment basis the other person invoice.
Yes, but Rule 47A says that he has to issue in both the cases 9.3 also, 9.4 also. That was what I was saying.
Now, what I am saying is 9.4 for sure, but 9.3, only an unregistered 9.3 is what I am saying.
Okay, okay.
It is, if a registered person is there in 9.3, then the invoice issued by that person would suffice and I will not raise a self-tax invoice. That's my view.
Sir,
Yes,
I
sir.
also concur because 47A reading says that where an invoice referred to in Rule 46 is required to be issued. So it is not said it is to be issued, it is saying it is required to be issued. And what Venuji is saying, when it is required to be issued, only when the supplier is unregistered. So 47A also matches with that particular view only.
Yeah, so we can bifurcate 9.3 in the way that registered or unregistered and link 47A according to the view that Venu sir just said.
Yes, and so the issue remains only about the unregistered supplier, 9.3 or 9.4. What will be the timeline of supply
Yes.
and what is the date of issuance of invoice?
And what should be the date of receipt of service for 47A?
And one more aspect is from 31(3)(f) and Rule 47A. Even in that section 31(3)(f) also use the word goods or services received by him from the supplier. Even if the Rule 47A also says the receipt of some goods or services. So I think in parallels with that, it goes with 31(3)(f) and Rule 47A. This is one way of reading together.
That way they are in sync with each other, right?
Yeah.
So, any other views we would like to discuss, or we can move to the next case study?
Madam, just in case of a forward charge, the date of receipt of service, I just want to ensure, do we go by the contract period or I'll take a simple example of I deploy a resource every month, 1 lakh, that resource will do accounting. Now, however, based on number of days worked, the time gets calculated. Let's say the resource has taken 5 days leave and accordingly client has approved for 90,000 rupees. But the timesheet has been verified and approved for the month of March. It got verified and approved on, say, 10th April. Now, the date of receipt of service should be taken as 31st March and 30 days from there, or 10th April and 30 days from there.
So can we repeat the timelines once? 10th April and
For the month of March,
yes.
I have to bill 1 lakh rupees. And the client has approved me to bill for 90,000 rupees based on the time worked by the resource. But this approval to bill has come to me on 10th April. Now, due date to raise invoice, would it be 30th April or 9th May?
It should be April when the approval has come.
Yeah, the service is for the month of March. but my approval has received on the tax would start from 10th April and 9th May would be the due date to raise the invoice.
Yes, so 31st March we cannot take because only the point of approval is guaranteeing, okay, that now you should issue the, this is complete from our end and you should issue the invoice or do the necessary formalities.
So
I
Yeah,
think date of
complete
approval
from
is the
the
key date.
yeah, from the recipient side, the service has to be received. So from the supplier side, I may say I have provided the service, but the recipient should also acknowledge that he has received the service.
Right.
And in my view, his confirmation date of 10th April will be treated as the date of receipt of service.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Are you
I
talking about
agree.
from ITC perspective?
No, from the date, when should I raise invoice? If I raise
So,
invoice on 5th May, am I in default, or should I raise the invoice by 30th April?
so in case when the supplier is unregistered, you mean to say?
Supplier is registered. I'm talking about a registered situation.
So if the
Since
supplier is registered, then you are talking about then when the supplier should raise the tax invoice under forward charge.
correct.
So okay, date of service. So okay, so date of the provision of service within 30 days he has to raise the tax invoice. So you mean to say will it be considered as March or will it be considered as May then 30 days?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, okay. Got it.
sir, hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Hello.
yes.
Sir, do you have any kind of a correspondence with regard to, you must have communicated to your client that my service has been completed for this period. You might have communicated to your client also. So will that won't tantamount to completion of service? That corresponding document would tantamount to completion of service. So if you must have communicated say on 2nd of April or maybe even on 31st of March itself that my service has been done. So you can just check and approve my fees.
Correct.
So if any difference would be there, then it can be like reduced through a credit note maybe. So your completion would be considered on 31st of March only. Accordingly, you have to raise the invoice by April, 30th of April.
Sir, this is very litigative. Actually, I also have seen a case like this where, certain commission based on sale for a distributor was just accrued in the books as on 31st March because the distributor only estimated that this could be the commission, probable commission, but the actual commission came only in August and it was issued in the form of a credit note from the main, the original equipment manufacturer. But then department said that because you have accrued in the books, you need to have paid the tax on it on as of 31st March itself. But the client had no clue on what the actual amount of commission is going to be.
So my view is me acknowledging that I have provided service is not what the law saying. The recipient acknowledging that the service is received. So he is acknowledging that yes, I agree that okay, yes, the service has come. Now in
Vinuji,
this, yeah, Arpitji.
Vinuji, in my view, always there is a condition that whenever I'm making a supply, whether it is of goods or service, the recipient has to approve it. But then when it would be treated as an integral part, that without such approval, the service or the supply of goods would not be treated as completed. In my opinion, every contract had a deemed clause of acceptance by the recipient. But then when the when the contract contains a specific condition that unless until the recipient approves it, then only it would be treated that upon acceptance by the recipient, the service is completed, and without the acceptance, service would not be treated to be completed. And if there is no such clause, then upon the information that the service has been completed, that should be treated as a completed. We can draw a reference from a sale on approval basis of the goods. See, every time I make a sale, there is an approval. But unless until there is a specific clause of on approval basis, every sale is not treated as completed only when the approval has been given by the recipient. Every sale is treated completed whenever the invoice is issued. So in my opinion, whenever there is a specific clause, then by going that clause, only when the approval is received, the service will be completed. And if there is no such clause, then upon intimation, the service should be treated as completed.
Sir, even we need not wait for intimation. No? Sir, actual service is
Yes.
completed. That
Yes,
is,
yes.
even the intimation
Yes.
is also not required.
Yes, definitely. Sir. Likewise, being a chartered accountant, we have filed a return. So we need not communicate to the recipient that we have filed a return. Upon completion of filing of the return, the service is complete. But if there is a specific law, like in case of contractors, that the awarder will check and verify and then approve the invoice, then it would be treated as a mandatory condition for the service being completed.
Yeah, I agree. So we go by the contract. Contract is silent. The date commences from the supplier's completion. If the contract is explicit, the date commences from approval by the recipient.
Correct.
Yes, agreed. But there might be cases where the contract is silent or contract is not there. Like we can take an example of services where say testing is involved and it is in phases, and then the final clearance condition is there that okay, the testing has gone fine and now we are ready for the final clearance. So only when the previous stage of testing is cleared, it has been approved, then we can go to the next stage.
I mean, in such case, with the example which you are citing is case of continuous supplier services.
Yeah.
Wherein stage-wise payment is involved.
Yes, we can take it in that sense. Then.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, I have one query relating to TDR, because TDR invoices are also RCM invoices, where a time of supply is a future date. So what will happen in that case? Because TDR generally registered person is issuing invoice for TDR under RCM. So what will happen in that case? Because time of supply is when construction is complete or unsold units are there after a certain period of time. So what will happen in that case?
Sir, in TDR, there is a notification specifically states with respect to the time of supply for TDR.
Time of supply, yeah, that is true. But RCM invoice has to be issued at the time of sale of TDR by the...
Sir, for TDR, landowner is anyhow not paying the tax. Value is crystallized the moment there is a first sale happening, the value is crystallized. It's only liability payment is deferred till the end. So the liability would be computed by the developer on the OC date. Hence, there's no challenge for the landowner, even if he is registered, in raising a taxable invoice, because there is no doubt in the valuation. The issue is only on the computation of the liability, because there are lower of two methods exist, so the developer has to compute. I don't see any challenge in the TDR.
For sale of TDR, so they will put some value. Sorry?
Sir, value, there is no issue in the TDR. Now, what is the challenge?
Contract value is the value right now. So, because the developer don't have to pay, because it will come in to be of the developer. Once the seller sells the TDR invoice under the same category, so they will raise an invoice. For TDR for X amount, and the time of supply will be after completion of project or so currently
Okay, I couldn't hear. I'm not sure about others. Voice was breaking.
Sir, I think what he's trying to say is that there is a issue between 31 and 13. 13 means the time of supply is deferred by the notifications that are issued on 31st of March
Yes, yes, yes.
2019. But the time for raising invoice, which is provided in 31, is not changed. So his issue is that whoever is raising invoice, let us say supplier or recipient, but the point is whether the 31 provisions will apply for raising invoice. If that applies, then he has to raise invoice immediately on signing of the JDA. Only the time of supply is deferred. I think this is what is his query, right, Tarangji?
No,
Yeah,
not even
yeah,
time of supply is
right.
deferred. Only liability to pay is deferred. Because the notification was issued under 148, there is no power to defer the time of supply. It was only payment
Time
was
to
deferred.
payment is deferred, correct?
Yeah, liability time of supply was date of JDA itself. So because the time of supply has occurred, then whether invoice is to be issued by a supplier who is registered, because even though it is covered under RCM, invoice should be issued by a supplier. And as per this provision, it should be issued on the date of JDA. Whether that is the issue, I think the sir is referring to.
Yes, yes, I think that is what is his concern.
Yeah, the date of issue.
Yeah,
Yes.
the moment the value is arrived, the value can be arrived basis we have the allocation agreement and the value of the first supply is known, the invoice would be issued. So what I am trying to say is there is no challenge. According to me, the invoice has to be issued. It is developer who will be computing when he has to pay all that. That is secondary.
Yeah,
Sir,
that
but
is
I
second.
think then there will be another
Okay.
challenge in case of commercial properties where ITC is available. So now he has to pay the tax at the end of the project, but invoice has to be raised at the start of the project. Will 16(4) not affect this?
Correct.
In commercial, I would always say that pay the tax in advance and take the credit because the credit is available.
Sir, but still it is a huge amount, sir. It may run into crores. Why will a builder would like to block his money immediately? He may decide to pay maybe at a later stage whenever he gets a booking so that he has a scope of utilizing the credit.
Yeah,
So let
your
us
point
think.
is right on 16.4.
So that is why I think he has raised the question because he's linking all
Yes,
these
yes.
provisions with 16.4 also eventually.
Yeah, that's true.
Sir, in that scenario, does the contract
Arpit hello.
Haji.
Will you link the dispute in payment also to the completion of service?
I will revert back in 5 minutes. I am driving, so I will revert back in 5 minutes.
That is a general question. As in earlier conversation, you said that the confirmation from the recipient will also be considered as a completion if contract provides.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
Once we have negotiated, we have finalized, and we have raised the invoice, there is a dispute. Right?
Okay.
And dispute is a legal dispute. So the buyer, or it is not a question for you in specific, but it is a general point I am giving in addition to your point, that after the provision of invoice to the buyer, they have disputed the facts that this is a problem, this is a problem. So I am cutting short my question whether disputing in the payment can be considered as a part of completion of service or not.
No, once the communication, if there is a specific clause that the recipient has to affirm first. So unless until the recipient would affirm, there would not be completion of service as per the contract. But once the recipient affirms and then the invoice is read and then there is a subsequent dispute, if any, then in such case, the subsequent dispute would not be linked with payment of liability to pay GST because the service itself is completed. Now the dispute is for some other case, and if the disputes, once a dispute settles and if it falls within the ambit of section 34 say, and if it allows, then credit note can be issued. But if a timeline under section 34 is also completed and or it does not fall within the ambit of section 34, the two clauses for which a credit note can be issued, then the liability would be payable on the complete value basis.
Correct, sir. I will extend this question in a chartered accountant service. Normally, we provide service, we complete service, we raise the invoice. Later on, surprisingly, only in the fees of chartered accountant, clients always say, Okay. So there is
हाँ.
a dispute. There is a mutual dispute, not a legal dispute. That sir ये ज़्यादा bill है आप कम करो. So whatever the consequences, I personally see number of cases wherein provisional invoices are raised by chartered accountants, wherein only on payment they raise the tax invoice. Considering this fact into the mind, and the circular issued in case of construction continuous supply of service, that service is not completed till the terms of payment are accepted. I agree with your credit note concept, that is not disputed, but there are many fields or the areas where payment is finalized at very later stage. So can the benefit of that clause, whether written or not, can be taken as a part of completion of service?
See, we have to
So
go to
I
payment.
would just like to interrupt once. I'm sorry. We can take this issue like offline or later on call. We can discuss
Yes,
one more
yes.
case study by then in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Good, good, good.
Sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you. And I want everyone, whichever the slide we are, let's have the question, because suddenly we went to development right now. We went back. Let's allow the speaker to complete and then we'll take. But anything on the slide, let's depict that question. That's all.
Yes, we'll
Please go.
definitely take it on the group. Arpit sir, with Arpit sir and Praveen sir. Okay. So we have this case study where Rajkumar LLP sent inputs of rupees 1,20,000 to Mr. Bhavat on 23rd December 2023 by issuing a delivery challan and an e-way bill. The delivery of the inputs was to be done by the job worker by June 2024. However, the delivery could not be completed by 23rd December 2024. So it is a case of job work where inputs are being sent by Rajkumar LLP to Mr. Bhavat. However, we all know the condition of 1 year. So the inputs are not received back within 1 year, and the case study says delivery could not be completed by 23rd December 2024. So the question is whether the inputs would be deemed to be supplied. If yes, then will the delivery challan would suffice as a tax-paying document? Whether Mr. Bhavat would be able to take ITC on the basis of such document? Because there is no invoice issued in this case, and the law is also silent on the point of issuing an invoice when the inputs are deemed to be supplied. Now, whether time limit for claiming ITC as per section 16(4) would come into play in this scenario. So I will also take you through the provisions. So what does 143(3) says? Where the inputs sent for job work are not received back by the principal after completion of job work or otherwise, in accordance with the provisions of 1A, or are not supplied from the place of business of the job worker, in accordance with the provisions of 1B, within a period of 1 year of their being sent out. So within 1 year they are not given back, it shall be deemed that such inputs had been supplied by the principal to the job worker. And when are they saying that this should be deemed as a supply? On the day when the said inputs were sent out. So considering this, on the day when the said inputs were sent out, we need to connect section 16(4). Now, the other provisions that are relevant here are 55(1)(b). Rule 55(1)(b) says transportation of goods without issue of invoice. So it talks about the delivery challan. Then transportation of goods without issue of invoice again, where goods are being transported on a delivery challan in lieu of invoice, the same shall be declared as specified in Rule 138. 16(2)(a). What does it say? It says that credit can be claimed when you are in possession of a tax invoice or such other tax-paying documents as may be prescribed. So can we say that delivery challan would fall under the ambit of such other tax-paying documents for the purpose of claiming ITC?
And
Definitely
delivery
not
challan is
DC,
not.
because that's not a tax-paying document.
Yes.
So one side, the law is enabling you by deeming this scenario as a supply. On one side, it is a supply, but what about the ITC part of it? The law is silent as to when the invoice should be issued in this case. And the delivery challan, just on the basis of delivery challan, it is deemed that the inputs were, it should be deemed that when the inputs were sent out, from that very day, the supply should be considered. So what should we do then for taking the credit? What should be the underlying document?
If I raise the invoice after 1 year, saying that now it has, is like till, if you go back to the case study, madam, the time limit available for someone was 23rd December 2024. Now, only on 23rd December 2024, it actually became supply. Now, liability to pay could be originating from 23rd December 23, but the supply, till that point, it was not a supply. Maybe the invoice should be raised on this date. Can we take that view?
But 143.3 is deeming that it had been supplied by the principal to the job worker on the day when it was sent out.
Anusha ma'am, if you can open Rule 45.
Okay, I'll do that.
Rule 45, sub Rule 4. So what Venuji is saying that Rule 45, sub Rule 4 is only affirming, and it is in line with what Venuji is saying.
Is it visible? Rule 45.4?
No, madam, we are seeing the screen, the PPT.
Now, so I'll read it out. Where the inputs or capital goods are not returned to the principal within the time stipulated in 143, it should be deemed that such inputs or capital goods had been supplied by the principal to the job worker on the day when the said inputs or capital goods were sent out, and the said supply shall be declared in Form GSTR 1, and the principal shall be liable to pay the tax along with applicable interest.
So the invoice would be issued when 1 year would be completed, and it would be reported in GSTR 1 of that month, but the liability would be treated to have arisen from 1 year back, and the tax would be required to be paid along with interest. But the invoice would be only be issued when 1 year is completed.
All right.
But coming back to your query, coming back to the question, that the first question, this was the second question which you had given. The first question, that whether it would treat a deemed supply. See, I have a different view, and although it is a litigative view, not a compliance view, Section 143 is not a provision which is impacting Section 7, or by going through by Section 7, it is treating it as deemed supply. Section 143 is an independent section. It has no link with Section 7. If Section 143 would have been the charging section for deeming this as a deemed supply, then reference to that should have been given in Section 7. See, Section 143(1).
143.1, should I open that?
Yes, sir.
Also, another point to add to Arpitji's question, imagine I am the job worker, and let's take a simple case. I am a tailor, I am doing stitching of the cloth. So for various reasons, you did not pick the material back. Just because you did not do what you were supposed to do, or I was unable to do the stitching of the cloth for my internal reasons. Now, a job which I was supposed to perform and I did not perform doesn't make this contract with me as if I have purchased those goods. And I will never make the payment to it. And when I am sending those goods back, whether repaired or unrepaired, I shouldn't be forced to send an invoice. And I like, now I'm forced to take an ITC and raise the invoice with the thing. I would ideally say that, okay, you are non-compliant, you do whatever you want to do. You want to take the material back, you take the back. I am neither going to record this as purchase, nor I would be recording as sales. See, law is deeming as a supply from the seller. it can't deem the buyer as if I have purchased. So I want views of others also on this point.
This is a good view, sir. The job worker might say this and he can just say that he does not have the responsibility only to deem this as a supply and get into all the issue of taking ITC or not taking ITC on time.
No, I think there should be a follow-up question. What will happen when he will return back the processed goods after the 1 year period? Again, now whether he should raise a invoice for the complete value, including the material cost, which I believe should automatically follow as a corollary. And there is where he should take the credit of what the original principal is charging.
Yes, Vishalji, there are two issues. One is what you are saying, that initially, if 1 year was not completed, so invoice had to be issued by the principal, and then the corresponding invoice would again be issued by the job worker, and he would be claiming credit of whatever tax has been charged by the principal.
Yes, sir. I'm
Yes.
just adding to
Ah,
Venu's
ah.
point, because I think he was raising the issue from the job worker side, whether he
Yes.
will report it as a purchase and take the credit. I
Yes.
think he will have to do that then.
Yes. But the first question is, can a deemed supply be, can a transaction be treated as deemed supply by way of section 143, wherein no reference has been made in section 7 or in schedule 1? Because in case goods are being sent by the principal to job worker and 1 year is complete, there is no movement of consideration between the principal and job worker for those goods. So either schedule 1 should have contained the reference to section 143, that after the completion of 1 year it would be treated deemed supply even though there is no consideration. Because by way of section 7(1)(a), it cannot be treated as a supply because there is no consideration. Only clause was 7(1)(c), wherein schedule 1 is applicable, but schedule 1 is also not making any reference to section 143. So in my opinion, section 143 is standing on its own leg without any reference coming from schedule 1 or section 7. And in case if there is a dispute, in my opinion, the first submission or challenge should be for treating of deemed supply without any reference coming from schedule 1.
Sir, I guess
Sir, I
that
think there is one more section 19 talking about the same thing.
Section 9.
But again, section 19 is from section 16 to 20, that is input tax credit.
Agreed. I agree to your point, and then I think the same issue will also come up when it is about that goods sent on approval basis, because over there also after 6 months we are deeming it to be a deemed supply after 180 days.
No, but then there is a consideration clause. The contract is there that the goods are being sent and there would be a consideration, or supposedly the transaction does not take place, then the buyer can always issue a credit note. Because in that case, for approval basis, there had to be something. But in this case, there is no transaction because the transaction itself is starting from that the goods are being sent from job worker without any consideration clause being there.
So we are questioning the very thing that it is a supply or not on the base, like section 143(3) is not supported by section 7 or schedule
Yes.
1.
So Arpit, you are saying that he should not be entitled to ITC at all, job worker.
No, what I am saying is that the 1 year time period for which has been given for raising of the invoice, completion of 1 year, it itself is invalid.
No, that is from the supplier side. We're talking about the position of ITC in the hands of job worker.
No, once the supplier challenges itself the validity part, so he would not be raising any invoice. So why there would be a question of job worker claiming the ITC?
So even before the point of ITC, Arpit sir is saying that it is not a supply in itself.
No, what I am trying to say, ma'am, can you go to section 16? Section 16(1).
It's visible. Every registered person shall, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed and in the manner specified in section 49, be entitled to take credit of tax charged on any supply of goods or services above.
This thing on any supply of goods. Only once we say that there is a, say even if it is a case of deemed supply. So whether because the ITC is available only once there is a supply of goods or services. So since there is no supply, so whether job worker should not at all be entitled to have the ITC because it is not satisfying the conditions of 16(1).
No, Vinmarji, what I am trying to say is that once the principal who is sending the goods to job worker is itself challenging the validity of 143, so he would not be issuing any invoice to the job worker. Once he would not be issuing any invoice to the job worker, he would not be charging any tax. So once he is not charging any tax, the job worker himself would not be paying any tax to the supplier, to the principal. So he would not be claiming any credit on that.
No.
One view is that it is not a supply at all, and then the question of
for
ITC.
example, say if that part is not challenged.
Okay.
I am presuming if there is a situation that 143 is not being challenged.
Okay.
Now, if we read this section 16 once as a standalone, when the supplier is the supply in the hands of supplier is not being challenged, still whether supply in the hands of buyer can be challenged because this is not a case of deemed supply. This is a case of supply simpliciter. Whether
in that case, once the principal is charged, so job worker would be taking credit by way of section 19.
Even if it is not a supply.
Taking input, because there is a specific section 19 for taking input tax in respect of inputs and capital goods sent for job work.
No, but it doesn't say about job worker taking the credit. It's saying about the principal taking the credit. Principal permitted to take the credit.
Okay, it is saying about principal. So yes, once what Vinmarji is saying that once the supply itself is questioned, then department can challenge its own provision that it is not a supply, so job worker would not be entitled to claim the credit.
Yes.
I think we should not conclude this point here.
Let's
dwell into the subject. Let each one of us mull over it, discuss in the group. And it's 10:07. Anushree madam, I'll only say sorry with the folded hands.
No, that's okay.
Sir, can I add one concluding point on this?
Let us come to the follow of this point. Now, the goods have been retained for a period more than 1 year. It has been treated as a deemed supply in the hands of principal. But the job worker is not entitled to ITC. Say we come to such kind of concurrence, for example, just for the sake of saying. But whenever the goods are returned back by the job worker to the principal, now this is a case of supply by job worker to the principal because the earlier there was a deemed supply. Now this is supply. Now when he is sending back those goods, whether at that point of time now he should be entitled to have the benefit of 16(1), and not just by retaining the goods for a period more than 1 year.
Vinmarji, we will
take it offline. See, what I will do is I will put all the views, whatever we have discussed, I'll put the views in the thing. Let us discuss and take this offline.
Yeah, we can take it on the group.
And I will, I have, because on section 143, the validity part, I have framed a small article also, so I will share that article also.
Sure,
please,
that would be good.
Please. Yeah. But Anu madam, I should definitely appreciate, it may appear very basic provision, section 31. You have made us to think into all the directions. We will logically conclude at this point here, and we will take it up in the upcoming session to close this, madam.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Madam, someone has to conclude. Anushree madam, can you click on end, please? End.
Yeah,